This is the Real Mom Hub. Keep listening for relatable content. So can't wait to analyze you.
You'll have to let me know. I'm intrigued. And maybe I'll come up with a whole new other completely inappropriate pause word. If I don't have one to.
Oh my God.
Work on one.
Like say penis every time.
I was thinking pecker, Callie. I was like, oh, pecker. Although really I need to say vagina because we know that's what sets the boys off. Vagina.
It just doesn't roll off the tongue as well, you know?
No.
It's more of a mouthful. Yeah.
Well, on that note, you want to do our little intro?
Sure.
We are joined by Auntie Megan today, and Auntie Megan is the middle sister on Dad's side of the family. And it was actually very tricky for me to write this intro because she defies concise branding. But I will say this, if I'm grappling with hard choices or want to talk through an action I'm not proud of or don't feel good about, this is the auntie. One of her superpowers is sincere curiosity about the core of a person, the qualities that make them most themselves and uniquely poised to contribute authentically to this world we all live in. She's a champion for the fun projects, ideas, and conversations that live outside of the typical box. And it should also be noted that for all the sage wisdom and pithy topics that we might cover on an average phone call with her, they all come with a healthy side of completely immature 7th grade boy humor. So we're not taking ourselves too seriously today. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Emily and Callie. Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing splendid. Although, like I said, I hardly recognize myself in that. And it's so awesome to get that perspective. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Thanks for embodying it for us. I'm curious what your perspective of yourself is. I'm sure
Yeah, I would agree.
I don't know about that. That's always a process that's like totally in the works. It just cracks me up. Like, yeah, I wouldn't recognize myself now, thankfully, from the person I was when I was your age, even.
So not only did Auntie Megan come with her own questions for us, but she already answered one of the ones we wrote. So, okay.
I did not cheat ahead of time. I mean, I tend to bend the rules now, but I did not do that.
Okay, we've asked this to everybody. So
Sure.
You are talking to a fresh generation of budding matriarchs. What is one trait that you hope we cherish in the years to come?
That was something actually I had to grow into. I would hope, let me figure out how to say this. I would hope that everybody would be able to, as they get older, realize that everyone's femininity is different and how it's expressed and how it resounds with them is different. Because I have learned some amazing things over the course of my time from other women who come from a vast variety of backgrounds. And it had less to do with who they were socially or politically and more to do with their core values. And then when I looked at sort of like, what were their core values, and not just their core values, but what are they sharing outside of themselves and their home? I think that might be the biggest thing. I was like, oh, I have so many women in my life I have to thank. Some don't even know it. Some it might have been a profound 10-minute encounter. And just having the grace, I think, to appreciate where people are coming from and take what you can from it. And if you don't get it or don't understand it, who gives a shit? Let it go. Yeah.
I want to go back to when you're encountering these women, you said, share these, I'm focusing in on the values. So identifiable values, embodying those values with strength. You also mentioned outside the home and family. What does that look like to you?
So one of the things that I think is really important for every single person, actually, is if you have strength, and we all do, call it whatever you will, call it grace, call it your chance genetic makeup. But our strengths are gifted to us. And so when we ask that question, why do I have so much? It's sort of a universal question. Why does somebody else not have this? That means then what are we doing with what we have not just for ourselves and not just for our family as we tend to identify by blood, but as our community. What is our greater responsibility? And I do tend to sort of gravitate towards people who have an understanding for their greater responsibility outside themselves and outside their nuclear family. I think that's super important.
So how do you suss that out?
How do you suss out their values? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just even if they're embodying their, like, it sounds like if they're embodying their superpower, their innate talents, and sharing it with the world, I bet you could tell pretty quickly if somebody is, but I'm just wondering if you have any like key things that you can say, oh yeah, I noticed they do this, or it could sound like it would take, a year to learn that
A
about
whole
somebody.
lifetime, maybe?
So does it take you a year? Maybe that's what I'm asking. Does it take you that long?
Is there a time
that's kind of a
frame?
cool thing, right? Is there's like, I had to move such a long way. It's so easy when you're younger, and it was especially for me for many reasons to make snap judgments, which inevitably, if I'd really stopped to think about it or taken the time, however that time was qualified to get to know somebody, that I would have been better equipped actually to understand how they were sharing their talent or their superpower outside of their home. And honestly, what I find is unless somebody just comes across really pretty quickly as self-absorbed, I can guarantee you almost everybody is trying in some fashion to help somebody else. They just don't tell you all about it because they're not blaggarts.
Is there a specific community outside your home you found kindred spirits in more than not?
Well, it's funny, that's changed as well. So when we've been up in the upper peninsula of Michigan for about 8-9 years now. And it wasn't actually until I moved here that I found my people for one reason or another. I think it's maybe the kind of casualness tendency towards authenticity and a bit of grunge that appeals to me, makes it a little bit easier to be myself, I suppose. Notice you see that this is what you're seeing today. Since we embody grunge as much as we can. Anyways, so one of the best parts about meeting people up here when we first moved was I did homeschool my two boys. They're now 21 and 18. And we have this fabulous community of young people. And just so you all know, when I say young people, I mean anyone from their late 20s on up until 53, just so you're aware what that means. And so when the boys were interested in different things, whether it was blacksmithing or robotics or mountain biking or luge, which is a winter sport, we had so many people here who were willing to share their talent, which goes back to what we were originally talking about. I mean, they're not looking for money. They're not looking to see how much they can make, but they are looking to share their passion. So that is what drew me to most people initially, were the different groups that we did with the boys, because I was always very active in those. And then it was super hard when that ended. How do I reestablish my own social relationships, and what does that look like? And honestly, I'm still working at it. I might find a lot of it at church, but by having done that, which is so beautiful in so many ways, I miss that bigger picture that I had before.
The diversity of the different circles.
Yeah.
My question is, when you made the choice to homeschool the boys, I know there are a lot of factors. So we've talked to Auntie Katie and Auntie Lisa at this point, and both have made very different choices of how they show up as a mom, not in their core, right? But in practical, like work, not work, homeschool, not that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I obviously just sort of had a frantic figuring out what the hell I'm doing when I got pregnant and whatever. Worked full time. Now I'm doing part time. I've tried some things, still making choices. Emily's about to start working full time.
Yeah.
And it's been a bit of a it's been a bit of a crisis, right?
No, because I've been
Exaggerating?
heavily suppressing it. So
Okay, so it could be a
it's
bit of a crisis. We're waiting for the day.
Well, because she doesn't know what that reality looks like yet. So she has
Right.
no way to know.
Yeah.
When you made the choice to homeschool your boys, or just do you remember, I know it was a long time ago, but do you remember
Yeah.
this sort of, do I work? Do I not work? Do I homeschool? Just what was that like for you?
Well, I never had any intention of homeschooling from the get-go. So
Okay.
that was not my original intent. I knew I wanted to be home when they were babies and toddlers. But I assumed they were going to go to school. And I think with Max, who's the oldest, being ADHD, dyslexic, dysgraphia, and all this other stuff, I think I do remember the point, because all these different labels didn't bother me. You know, I've talked to, and I understand it's difficult when you have a kid who learns differently. It wasn't the fact that he learned differently that shook me. It was the day I'm sitting there talking to this guy who's delivering a diagnosis to us, and he says to me, "Wow, Max is so lucky he has you to homeschool." And I was like, "Really? Because I was just thinking he needed to get in school so I could save myself."
How old was he? Like, how far down the road
This
are
all
we
came
here?
probably about first or second grade, because
Okay.
so as you all know, I'm way better now than I used to be. And I do mean better, because I do think there's nothing wrong with who we inherently are, but we're always trying to expand our brains and our minds. And I was a rigid left-brained person. And when you throw a almost exclusively right-brained child into my lap, I thought something was wrong with him. I was like, what the hell is wrong with you? And then I realized that if I wanted a different paradigm, and factually in most schools and most school districts, statistically, a child who has as many issues as Max is going to fall through the cracks. And they really aren't for most cases. I have talked to some people in different parts of the country who have been so blessed to have school systems that did such a beautiful job working with them. So that is not a universal response. But where we were, I thought, okay, I could take everything I love about this kid and throw him into the great social experiment that has no clue what to do with him, because we did actually try and learned very quickly that, yes, it is a great social experiment.
That being school?
Yeah. Or I can expand my own brain. I can be a grown-up, and I can show that there's other ways to look at a problem, and I do actually have the capability to bend my brain. So
It's funny for you to use the term, like, I can be a grown-up, because I think in terms of status symbols in this country, so much of being a grown-up would have been the fancy job, which you were really successful at prior to having kids.
yes,
Yes. I mean, you definitely had options, and you definitely could have been a grown-up in a much more status quo way. So it's funny to me that was your internal reaction to the situation.
You know,
Just being a grown-up, Miki.
Yes, because being a grown-up to me meant think about somebody besides yourself. It meant you and Drew decided to have children. Here's this great gift of this child. And how are you going to handle and demonstrate what it means at its most basic level to be the best human you can be? So if I can't teach that, then I'm a...
So
Anyway.
your oh shit moment in the doctor's office, was that because you were grieving like a sense of you would have some time back because you'd be in school, or you wanted to go to work, or like was there a grief process, or
great
what
question.
was behind that?
I was afraid. I was very much afraid I would fail, very much afraid that if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do this the way that has been proven to not work. I'm going to figure out what I need to do to celebrate what this means and give our child the tools. And when I say left brain, I'm like I mean, I actually think in imagination now on occasion after all these years, which is extraordinary for me. So, but you know, to teachers, it may mean nothing to you guys. But we're talking learning to jump a number line, learning to use your body and trampolines and all these things. And at the time, honestly, especially for dyslexia, tools and resources were very difficult to find. So I think, Kelly, it was fear of failure. It was, I'm going to do this differently, and I have no idea if this different way is going to be helpful or not. And this is a human being. It's a little bit different than, I made a mistake at work on this quote.
So you knew exactly like what you needed to do. It was I know what I need to do. I kind of know how to get there. This is going to be really hard. That was the...
Wait, I heard the opposite. I heard, I don't know where the tools are. I don't really know what arrival will look like. How do I get there?
Both of those things, actually. But, you know, I mean, honestly, and we did follow some traditional resources, for sure. But in the end, there was quite a bit that was unique to Max that we needed to figure out. And then his brother was always just a champ because Simon was very flexible and he just kind of went with the flow for so long. We really wish he could be here today.
We'll have to do an episode with just Simon. That would be really funny. I want to go back to one thing. When you said you were afraid, what were you afraid of? Do you even know? Or was it just like this overwhelming, like what did the fear embodied look like to you?
The fear, a lot of different things. So I was one of those slow maturers. So when I can't decide what's more difficult, frankly, I can't decide if it was more difficult growing up in a generation where you had certain expectations and steps laid out for you that you just did because you didn't think about it. That's what you did because that's how we became successful. Or now where the world is such an open place where I can see how it would be very overwhelming and full of panic because there's actually no steps or I have to recreate all the steps. So, but in my case, it was following the steps, and somewhere along the way, waking up and realizing by following the steps, I had no clue who I was, and I was married with a child. And I was like, this is awkward. So my fears were so much of that. It was like, all right, so part of my fear is pure selfishness. Who the hell am I? How am I going to figure that out? And then the other part was, okay, so single income, my kid clearly isn't going to fit the paradigm. A left brain person, these are really embarrassing things to admit, but people need to hear this. Left brain person is like, how do I measure success? Well, how did you do in school today? What grades did you get? What book did you read? All these very sort of status quo traditional patterns that I had been very, very successful at. So part of the fear was, how do I look?
Yuck. Cringy.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Totally. It was, how are people going to perceive me? And that was a real awakening process for me. It was super embarrassing for sure, and had to work really hard at that, letting all that go and not caring what people thought, because people had all sorts of thoughts.
I think every mother feels that, what are other people going to think of me at some point? And there's so much pressure, and it's from, I mean, it could be anything. Like, did I breastfeed? Did I not? Am I staying home? Am I working outside of the home? If I am staying home, people, that's not glamorous. There's so many things that we all feel. So I don't think you need to be embarrassed at all that you had that thought. I think we all do. I wish we didn't, but it's nice to know that you don't anymore, because, man.
Well, she didn't say that.
No, shit, maybe I heard that. No. Can you say that for me, please?
No, I have actually gotten to a point for the most part. I mean, obviously you have those weak moments where all of a sudden you look up and you realize where you're uncomfortable and you're like, oh, because I'm worried what so-and-so sitting across me is thinking. but rarely anymore, because I'm just like, you know what? Just like Callie was saying, most of us are doing the best that we can with what we have. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to get it wrong. So that is actually I suppose might even be bigger than the other thing I said at the beginning. Understand that we aren't special at all. You are not alone or unique. And these things that are difficult, everybody has these things unless they live only on the very surface of their brain, and very few people can do that.
I'm fascinated by you because when you become a mom, when you have your first kid, there's no way to know how that's going to feel, how that's going to go for you. You can't see it in movies. Love stories, you can get a general inkling of. You can get like a brush of, oh, this will be similar to what I could hope to experience in a book or in a movie. You can't with motherhood. You can't. So there's always going to be this identity rebuild, I think, as a new mom. Auntie Katie called it being shattered, which I think is so apt. Like you're just utterly, utterly shattered. And then you just have to put yourself together again, stronger.
Yeah.
I think over and over again, I'm learning in my 3 years of mothering.
Yes.
I've just had the one big one, so I'll call you for the continuing shattering.
Yours was pretty big though. Oh.
No, I'm not special. I'm not unique. We all.
You're right. You're not special. Shut up.
And I want to go back to Auntie Megan's special time, being a young mother, not married that long, and just having this panic moment of who am I?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, did Uncle Drew know who you were? Did you have people in your life to reflect back on you who, how do you have those feelings, rebuild, and then maintain those relationships?
The person who probably knew me best was Drew and my mom.
Oh.
And I was afraid to ask anything of my mom because I didn't want to face truths. So, and this might get a little more serious than people aren't intending. And my husband knew me, but I didn't give him the credit of knowing me. And so what happens is how do we create boundaries for ourselves? And how do those boundaries change or expand or include other people? And what does that look like? And for me to be able to establish appropriate boundaries as a married couple, as a mom, as a family, you have to know yourself. So I didn't know myself. And so I had all these expectations in my head about who I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to act, especially since I was on this journey I had not expected. So I honestly would say that journey took me a long, long time. And I didn't have truly any sense for who I really felt I was until I moved up here and figured it out on my own, because you can't when you're that lost, you can't rely on other people.
Right.
Other than Drew, obviously.
But even relying on a spouse when you're trying to get a hold of yourself, I mean, there's a difference between accepting support and leaning fully on.
Right.
And if you're actually on a mission to figure yourself out, I mean, that really is a solo journey. So I would think that would be much harder to do in a partnership, respectfully.
Yeah. Oh, there was actually some things that definitely were, because when you're as old as I am, as I was, honestly, I mean, most of us ask those questions when we're a teenager. I was too busy getting grades and doing good at everything I was supposed to do well at. There's no particular reason for that. There's no nobody pressured me. No, nobody said. This was just something inherently in the way that I did things. So I did learn really quickly that I'm not special, because as soon as we start thinking we're special in that way, we very easily create ourselves as victims. And when you create yourself as a victim, then you create stories as to why you are. I'm not saying there's not some reality in things. I'm not discounting that at all. I'm just saying that our brains are so powerful that when we are lost and drowning, we are very, very good at creating stories to support where we are because it's so comfortable in its discomfort. We're miserable, but we know it. And it's so, so hard to believe, to let go of that and be and do something else. Sorry, I got a little serious there, but that's
let's go.
my reality.
Yeah. So you said these are questions that you answer often when you're teenagers. What were I'm so curious about this moment for you. What tipped you off to not knowing who you were?
I think because I found myself living in a constant state of reactionary anxiety and anger.
So if you don't know what your aim is, how are you supposed to play offense? You're just constantly on the defense?
No, not even offense. How do you just sit and be? How do you take a moment? How do you not feel threatened? So if you're angry and you're feeling threatened, it tends to be because somebody is not even purposefully, but you will interpret it as attacking something very special to me. And it could simply be that they are presenting a point of view vastly different than yours, especially if it's a valid point of view. It's more terrifying.
Yikes. Look out.
So it's all about how you were receiving the world.
Yes.
Like any feedback that you were receiving.
That's a great way to put it. Pretty much. My poor husband.
Wow. Well, and can we just say, I would like to, spoiler, Max and Simon are two of the coolest people I know. And it's been so fun living in the Midwest. And having you and Uncle Drew pop in, you're just so fun to hang out with together.
I mean, I actually miss you guys. We worked hard for that. So I love that because that has just, I'm telling you what, you guys are on the other end. This whole empty nest syndrome, I kind of get it, but just wait, you guys. Someday when your kids are out and you have that time alone again and you can have sex whenever you want, you don't have to be quiet, or actually maybe you should be, but if you're not, your kids then apparently move out of the house. So I've been told.
I heard that too from someone.
Yeah. But I'm like, it is so awesome. But Drew and I were able, though, by working from home and homeschooling at home, which was sometimes torture, but it's impossible to ignore when you're that close together. It's impossible to ignore when you have issues that have to be addressed. You cannot ignore them. So we really had to slog through things and sort things out. And I actually love that because our relationship is just so much stronger for that. And just, a lot more fun now.
On topics you wanted to talk about, you said having boundaries and identity while holding them in communion with sacrifice. Ouch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And can I jump in and just say, Emily and I have been trying to put words to that question this whole podcast process.
Yeah.
And I think that's been one of the overarching questions, actually. I'm really, really good at the sacrifice. I will always choose the sacrifice route and then I'll feel victim a lot of the time. Emily's really good at the boundaries.
Yeah. I'm sorry, that's just not going to work for me. Yeah, no, okay. And then afterwards I'll be like, am I a terrible person? And do I care? Not a good way to be in community.
So that's why, putting the name to both of, our drastic sides of this that we've been trying to hash out, that's why it was so much of a gut punch.
For me, I think that as I was struggling to find out who I was, I had to set up boundaries for myself that were pretty tight, meaning I wasn't in community, actually. I wasn't generous at all with other people. I needed time to sort through my own shit, honestly. And I couldn't do that with feedback, no matter even if it came from loved ones. It wasn't possible for me because I needed to see things through a different lens, not through the lens from which I came. That wasn't working. So once I gave myself that time, I had to figure out how do I reevaluate boundaries? How do I honor what people have to say, honor how they feel, and not feel obliged to do anything about that necessarily? And then on the other hand, the I think the most important thing is I am this person with these hopes, expectations, and dreams. Here's another person with these hopes and expectations and dreams. Here's this community. And often we have to sacrifice to actually make all that. And it's so hard to explain. In order to make all that come together, like I can't be thinking only about myself. It might be something super, super simple. Sacrifice to me, I mean, think of it as sometimes people relate more to detachment or letting go of your ego. These are all the same things, you know. In many cases, you're having a conversation with somebody and they're feeling really passionate about something, and you may agree or you may disagree. Maybe your sacrifice is silence. You know, I mean, so I'm not necessarily talking. I think sometimes people think of sacrifice as these really huge things, and they can be. But sometimes it's these little things, and the key is doing it cheerfully.
That's the part I struggle with.
I do too. So when I guess to me, if you want to will the best, you know, by loving somebody, whether you're loving them as a friend, whether you're loving them as a partner, or you're loving them as a community member, if you want to will the best for them, you have to be willing to make little sacrifices. And as long as it's not in any way invading you as a person or your boundaries, then that's what we should be doing most of the time, I think.
So when I'm having issues with boundaries right now, context, lived on a different coast for years and had no problem with boundaries because we honestly just lived a fancy carefree life. We'd built our own community there. I mean, it was great. It was easy. Do we want to do this? Yes or no? Are we available? Yes or no? You know, or if it was family, do we have the money for a plane ticket? Can we find? Yes. Great. We'll be there, you know? Yeah. So now what I'm faced with is emotional payoff for these boundaries. So, and they're often accompanied with love. And so for me, in trying to figure out, I don't know, not even like a rubric, but like the rules of the game for myself when there's emotion involved, I'm needing to figure out what the important values are to figure out when the sacrifice is appropriate. And I'm really struggling with that. So do you have values in your brain? Where do you concede sacrifice? When is that valuable to you? Or when have you had payoff from that motion?
So it's really interesting you ask that, because when I first had my existential crisis when we were, first married and I was pregnant, and actually this might have been a year into it because we were already in the house on Brookford Drive. I can remember, here was my phrase, because boundaries for me at that point in time meant boundaries for my own emotions and reactions. And I would wake up and my
you were like containing yourself in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So my question was, does it matter? That's my most basic one. Matter. That's it.
Does what matter? Does your reaction matter?
Anything. That was my most basic one, Emily. Like, that's how I started. It was like, does it matter? Meaning, someone said something to me this way. Someone shared this with me. Someone, and notice how I'm saying someone. These are all reactive sort of things, right? And it was, does it really matter? So that was my, and that's a very, frankly, that's a very childish question. And that's really for people who don't have a whole lot of self-identity. And it was one of the reasons why I continued to homeschool for so long. And then as I got older, Emily, it was, as a homeschooling mom, see, these questions change. One of the things I loved about homeschooling is that we could make the sacrifice for me to be home. It was definitely very, very difficult in the beginning. We were not, for a long time, we were not financially wealthy to be able to do that, especially when we're getting special curriculum for dyslexia. And the boundaries became, why do people assume I can do everything for them because I'm not doing anything? So that was a boundary we had to learn to set. Why when I call to volunteer for something and they hear that I'm a homeschooling mom, do they want to put me in the kids' craft corner? You know, these sort of
because you're so good at crafts, obviously.
Right. little did they know, right? So, and then I know I'm taking a long way to answer your question, Emily, but I think that boundaries and how you define them and what questions you ask yourself, you're just doing the best that you can every single time.
So this is going to sound like a fake question, and it's not. When you were thinking, does it matter? Were you acknowledging feelings? Like, does it matter? Because I went okay, this is my preface. Ready? I'm learning how to have feelings. That's where I'm at right now, is literally, like when I'm in therapy, she's like, well, you actually just need to feel it first. And I'm like, no, but how do I? No, you just have to feel it. No, but what do I do to fix it? No, you have to feel it and name it. So, which to Emily is like, what? Duh, right? I mean, you're pretty good at feelings over there, I think.
I've learned in therapy that I'm not great at identifying them.
Oh, that surprises me.
I've simplified them. Back to you.
Okay. So when you're saying does it matter, were you saying that towards your own feelings? Like, does it matter that I'm feeling defensive, or does it matter that offended me, or does it?
I don't know if this will answer the question, but since we're on the whole therapy thing, mine was, why do you take everything so seriously and assume it's about you? Oh. So does it matter to me, man? Why are you so egocentric that you create stories? Who is that? Brave, standing alone in the wilderness. Brene, what's her name?
Brene Brown. Love her.
Thank you. Yeah, she did such a beautiful job of explaining what we do when we're very egocentric. We create these stories to justify ourselves, really, or we create stories that don't exist. So for me, Kelly, doesn't matter. I had emotion. I had plenty of emotion. The question was, did I need to have it? And was that particular emotion even appropriate? And how long did I plan on hanging on to it? So, yeah, so I had more emotion to spare. Would you like some, either of you? Oh, I've done a pretty good job now.
Turns out I have them too. I'm just learning about them. So.
Being human is hard, girls.
So hard. Hard. So what did Uncle Drew's human journey look like during this time of self-exploration for you? Like, what's he doing?
Well,
like hanging out?
Well, he actually, so it's very, very difficult when you are a single income family and you choose to do that, because it's a complicated balance, and it's back to the whole sacrifice. And I'm leaving your question of, how much do we sacrifice? When do we sacrifice? How do we sacrifice? Should we sacrifice? And Drew had to carry the financial burden for us. And I think at the time it was so difficult that was really his focus. And mine was the kids. And that's a difficulty right there, because we didn't have a shared purpose then. Not really. So,
wow.
I was doing my thing, he was doing his thing, and I was struggling. So honestly, I mean, there was lots going on in the house during that time. I doubt it was 100% pleasant for either of us, frankly, because self-discovery is hard.
Yeah. So when you say you didn't have a shared purpose, you're both dreamers. Did you have a shared dream, at least?
Well, we did, but I think when Drew's dad died and he needed to take over, he chose to take over his dad's business in order to make sure that his mom was taken care of financially. That was a sacrifice I don't think either of us truly understood at the time, and really took its toll. And how we journeyed through that aspect of it was oftentimes very hard. So he was going through his own thing because he is a dreamer and he is an entrepreneur and he's super creative, and to take over this business that quite frankly is dry and boring and thankless really was very difficult. It was hard. And I know you guys all know that when you're doing something like that, it is super hard to feel fulfilled and happy. So
I thought you were just going to stop at to feel. It's really hard to feel.
That's true too. That's me.
So I think a lot of our journey since then was how do we build purpose together and how do we reclaim hope for the future? And I think we've come a long way and done a pretty good job. So I'm very grateful for that.
So when you moved, was that a joint, I mean, obviously it was a joint decision, but was that sort of healing for both of your souls?
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, we needed that nuclear family time. We needed a fresh start where we didn't have history and geographical location. And so you guys will laugh at this. So we had some various reactions within the area where we were about homeschooling that were less than pleasant. It could be random strangers when you're out at the grocery store trying to quiz your kids, to an actual pastor of a church telling us that this particular church doesn't like homeschoolers because it takes away from the parochial schools. So we ran into a lot of different stuff, and we were really looking forward to maybe people with a bigger mindset who by nature of geography and remoteness where we're willing to find what is it that joins us and brings us together. So I walk into St. Louis the King Catholic Church for the first time. And there's this woman behind the desk. And I look at her and I said, "My name is Megan. I'm new. I homeschool." And she looks at me and she goes, "Oh, Megan, it's so lovely to meet you. I work here and I homeschool too." And I said, "They let you work here?" And she's become one of my best friends since then. So it's been very cathartic for us, Kelly. I mean, it was, I think that we had so many different individual egocentric behaviors that we had to let go of. And it really allowed us to do that here. I mean, the first time we got an invitation from somebody, "Hey, come out to my house. We're having a party on Saturday." I kid you not. I texted her. I said, "So, Sarah, when you invited us over, did you mean that?" And she's like, "Yes, Megan."
It wasn't pity, you're sure?
Yes. Well, and it wasn't even like, no, we were thinking more of inauthentic behaviors. Was that just a, "Oh yeah, come over"? Or was it a truly, am I invited to your home? Anyways, it's been lovely here.
It's just awesome hearing all of the different perspectives, but it also, I was so ready for a fresh start. I was ready to go to Montana. I was so ready for us to just, forge ahead and hike and whatever. And he took this job, and it's been really good for us in a lot of ways. And I actually really like Wausau. I said it again. It's good for me.
I like Wausau.
But at the same time, we're both sacrifice for community is our go-to before boundaries. And so it's even more difficult for us, or maybe it's good for us. It's probably actually just a really good learning opportunity to have to set boundaries with people that we really rely on for community, for our livelihood, for the success of our family. And so it's something we're definitely still figuring out, but it's tricky.
It is. And you do have to, at the risk of sounding new agey, which I don't mean at all, you do need, first and foremost, to take care of yourself and your own. And it changes. It might change week to week. If you're fashed out, you call everybody for the next 3 days and say, "I'm canceling everything. I need to recharge." And none of that should be taken personally. But unfortunately, I think that happens a lot. That's a challenge for sure.
It's kind of fun having almost opposite or inverse situations.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm learning a lot from Callie. Like, I think you and Kevin have gone through so much more maturing fires than Kyle and I have in terms of navigating these waters. So it's kind of fun to grow in different ways.
We have
together.
to learn the fun.
Oh, you'll get there. I mean, you guys will get there, Kelly.
When you had such different, like when the boys are really little, he's working, he's totally focused on work, you're totally focused on child rearing. Did you ever have sex?
Actually, it's really, really important. So, especially the way I was growing up or grew up, female sexuality should be fulfilled. It is one of those things when people ask me those questions, I think, okay, well, the truth of the matter is when we were at our best and when we were most intimate, of course we were sexually intimate. And when you're going through long dry spells, I would tell everybody, stop and figure out why. Are you working too hard? Is he working too hard? Are you spending too much time apart? Have you not gotten enough babysitters? Have you not gotten on a date? Is there something underlying problem? Because I know there are people in the world where the sexual intimacy from the very beginning is not as important. And that's their own journey. But when you are, and it is important, and it's not happening regularly, however you define regular, but when someone starts telling me they're down to once or twice a month, I'm like, whoa, what's the problem? I think it's so important, actually.
And we're very earthy, right? Like Baba prayed for Sadie and William to have plenty of fights so they could have breakup sex before they were even married. So that was our upbringing. It's been something that we've had to talk about a lot. And I still, even though we have such an earthy family, I still had to grow a lot to say, no, I desire this. But it's just interesting because I don't know if it's an O'Leary mindset that sex is so important and indicative of how your relationship is going. Because I don't think that's everybody's mindset.
Kyle, I think, grew up maybe considering immaculate conception for him and his brother. I don't know. But, like, literally, and his mom is an open book. Like, her tactic when they were kids would be and she's told me this, she would be driving in the car with them and try to talk to them about sex because she wanted to have open dialogue in their family. And the boys would not. Both of them just couldn't handle talking about it, hearing about it, uncomfortable, not a thing. So that's his upbringing, and his love language is physical touch. So like in Kyle's perfect world, it would be a daily occurrence. Poor man hasn't gotten a good lay since Kieran was born because I'm still trying to find a pelvic floor therapist. Like literally there's like a physical barrier right now that I need to go to PT to address. So it's problematic.
And I will say to all this though, I mean, because I feel like sometimes people overthink the question of sexuality and how much and how many and what requires what's healthy. I will definitely say that after your baby, however many babies you choose to have, you take how much time you need. There's no magic formula. And especially if you are choosing to breastfeed, being touched out is a real thing. And I think it's really important, yes, I 100% believe in fulfillment of female sexuality and that you should be able to work with your partner and have amazing experiences with communication. But oftentimes when you're in those situations, the time is not right and neither should you feel obliged.
Yeah, briefly.
Let's talk about sacrifice again.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, that's part of it.
Part of my self-work right now is I want to be careful with the wording. To be physically intimate in this time, it is a sacrifice for me. And I don't, sometimes, but it needs to happen because of the way he receives it. So it's that fine line of it needs to be coming from a place of generous spirit for it to be healthy.
Yes.
So that's the tiptoe that I'm on right now while I figure out what the hell is going on downstairs since that delivery of sweet baby boy. But I will say also in the meantime, we're doing homework. We're reading, we have this book, Sex Talks, that just got released. It's written by a sex therapist and her husband.
Ooh.
Highly recommend. It is fantastic. It kind of synthesizes a bunch of other work that I've read throughout the years in a really easy, digestible way. So what's happening is I'm going through and reading a chapter and actually annotating it. And then I'm handing it to Kyle. And so it's been really fun because she articulates, I mean, she's been a sex therapist for years and she articulates a lot of common problems. So in the paragraph that talks about a woman being so touched out that if anyone touches her at a specific moment, she feels like she needs to scream.
Yes.
Triple underlined it. And then I didn't have to tell Kyle in those moments. He could circle back in a time of emotional sobriety. And he could say, I see you're feeling this way. How often? And I'm like, when am I not? You know? So
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's been our story.
I think you need to put
That's
that book in your notes.
I will. It's highly, I'm not through it yet, but highly recommend. They also have a podcast and a great Instagram page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that podcast episode on Armchair that she was on, when she talked about if you don't want to have sex, really don't do it.
Yes.
That actually was good advice to me because that seems so obvious, but I had really felt like we just need to make it happen and then it's going to help it continue to happen. Like, you know, people say, put it on your schedule, make it happen. That is shitty advice.
Yeah, I tried that. Scheduling sucks.
Yeah, I thought I never understood the scheduling sex thing, honestly. I mean, because usually the most marvelous moments are the ones you don't plan.
Yes.
And I do think actually to Emily's point previously, while respecting it, Callie, what you said, which is true, there does reach points of time though, on occasion where you're like, but this could be healing. This could be useful. It is coming out of a place of love and compassion. Maybe not at this moment in time, a whole lot of excitement, but sexual intimacy is a whole nother thing, especially now when I think there's maybe a distorted sense of reality about what that is. Because in a really intimate relationship, you are actually vulnerable and you are authentically there and you are full of love and compassion. And this can all happen while having wild, hot, sweaty sex if you want, you know, however that's presented to you, but you're not likely to get there and feel complete from that unless you have these other things in place. And I do think we've done a great disservice in sort of categorizing things to, was it a good screw or not?
And how many times are we lying about that? Like, you can't even get good data on that because societally you're supposed to celebrate how good it was without going into any details. Because if you talked about details, then you have to acknowledge the fact that maybe it wasn't that great, which then stops us from having really mind-blowing experiences because we're not honest about it.
Yeah, we didn't get to know each other that well ahead of time so that we could actually have this honest discussion about, you know, that without getting hurt feelings, without getting upset, that didn't quite work. This worked better. I preferred this. Don't do that again.
Like if you can't do an effective post-mortem together, like
post-mortem,
is it time?
Well, it just means you got work to do. Anyways, I'm sure this was not part of what I put on my agenda, but
I know. Thank you because like we're probably, I don't even know, we're your nieces. Should have put like the auntie we go to for sex advice in the intro.
You know what?
Callie.
Breaking barriers.
Yeah, Callie Marie.
I'm also hearing that in this stage of life, empty nester, sex, mind blowing every day. So don't tell me anything else. That's all I need.
And I'm curious when you hear the word matriarchy. what
I do
comes to
feel like
mind?
that's a loaded word, both positive and negative. So matriarchy, when I first think of the word matriarchy, I immediately think of my mom and the babas. So what that brings to mind to me, and I mean all the Bulgarian babas that I grew up with, I think of strong, resourceful women. I think of women who fed people, like back to the whole community aspect. They fed community. They were with not just their own kind. I think of people who are really strong in tradition. I think of people who understand that food and tradition is what keeps your family and your community together. And a lot of that to me is very powerful and very beautiful. And then I feel like it's been warped a little bit and it's become a more aggressive form of power that I don't relate to personally. That it means all things women, as opposed to this inclusivity of tradition and food that my babas showed me. I also found sometimes that it was difficult for me to figure out what that meant for me and my nuclear family, and figuring how to honor where Drew came from, which I did not initially do a very good job of, because I was like, well, my way's better. And I'm the matriarch. So, but the truth of the matter is, when you hold together food and tradition, and that is the thing, oftentimes this is what unites community. And for me, that is what a matriarch can often do in a really unrecognized and yet extraordinary way.
I think that's the most positive reaction that we've heard about from that word. It is so charged right now. And my perception of the word is really what you outlined, like female figures within a family, within the greater community, leading through abundance of food and hospitality and sage wisdom. And now we are in this point, I think it's a counterpoint to patriarchy so often. And patriarchy in 2024, we so often talk about it in disparaging tones because it exists as a way to exclude women intentionally. I'm not saying that's true. I think that's how we view the patriarchy. Yeah. And also, then if you were to switch over to a matriarchy, then that's at the exclusion of men, right? Which is, it's difficult. So I'm hoping that in our generation, we would be a perfect marriage of matriarchy and patriarchy together, which I know definition-wise is not sound, but
no, but
that would be the goal.
Okay, so exactly though. So sort of like I was talking to a friend of mine who goes to a different church, and she brought together a group of young moms, and their goal was to look at the existing matriarchy and choose the role models that they felt exemplified a positive influence. So not the pursed-lipped disapprovers,
sure,
by any stretch. The ones who see the crying baby and smile. The ones that see the kid that runs up the aisle and goes and maybe picks them up and tickles them and throws them in the air and takes them out to play. And they decided their goal, and they're all in their 30s, they're babies. Their goal is to age into that so they can create this environment for other women that allows that sort of inclusivity of matriarchy, of femininity, of different ways of doing things. I mean, that's actually all rolled up into that then. It's very welcoming, it's very loving, it's very accepting. And I loved that, because it's sort of to that point of what you're saying is, how do we do this moving forward? And that's a small, tiny example, but
that's really, where you start.
Exactly.
And I think that's why I'm so drawn to community, and why my go-to is sacrificing for community, is because I just love that model of a village of matriarchs. That thought of, the ones who are young having babies, that's their role, and they're breastfeeding and they're doing their best and they're vibrant. But then, you get to I think Esther Perel talks about this, you get to your 50 and 60-year-olds, that's when they're really the ones helping the younger women, and they're the wise women, and they're showing the way, and they're bringing you food, and they're just like, it makes so much sense to my crunchy soul. It just clicks into place. And so I think that's where a lot of my desire to sacrifice comes, because I just want that community of those types of people.
But I love that, Kelly, though. But see, but that's all about time and place as well, though. So one of my favorite things is I don't have the responsibility of kids, is I can create time and space in my home for young women and couples, my friends who are younger than I am. Sometimes it's couples, sometimes it's their own. But I used to feel bad that I didn't invite their families. Now I do it on purpose. It's like, nope, my house is for your chance to get away. My house is a time for me to cook food, to do something, to have you over. And I love to be able to do that. Or if someone needs to take a walk or go do something, I can do that. And it's just awesome. But I think one of the things too, though, is recognizing in our journey that there's things we can and cannot do. And I do think that's really important. Sometimes when you have kids, there's things you can't do all the time. You chose to have kids. Your time is going to come again. But in the meantime, no one should feel bad or bend over backward or change circumstances in order to hopefully, create situations and times where everything is perfectly aligned and you can come or you can do this. And I don't mean this maliciously at all, because I've actually tried in my mind, how can I do this so everybody can come? I'm like, well, you can't. And so that's what I love about this changing of roles as a matriarchy is what opportunities arise as your circumstances change, where you can, and I think maybe instead of thinking of sacrifice all the time, actually it's more like a giving of yourself. And it's a giving and a receiving, and it's such a beautiful thing.
Well, I think even giving of yourself, if I have a hard time inviting people over for dinner if I know that my house is going to be a disaster, or I can't cook a wonderful meal, or I can't. So I'm having to learn that giving or sacrifice of like, no, you can come see the messiness. No, you can help me. It's good for me, but man, that's hard.
Yes, it is.
So we've talked about the matriarchs that you grew up with in a positive light, and the things that you loved about that matriarchy.
Yeah.
What are you doing differently? Like, what have you done differently with your family? New traditions, original ones. What does that look like for you?
I might have perhaps gone too far the other way. I think I loved growing up with tradition. I actually find the matriarchy and tradition can sometimes be actually two different things. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're not. So for me, I found it was less about matriarchy that way and more about how do I form healthy female relationships, which I didn't really do as much until I moved up here. So matriarchy for me in many ways, and maybe it was a result of having two boys, it's less matriarchy for me and more femininity. How do I identify myself as a female? How do I retain a femaleness within a house that's strongly male? How do I relate healthfully and with joy and gratitude and authenticity towards other women? That's what changed for me.
Intentionally? By happenstance? Both?
I think both, because I realized when I moved, it was if I was going to break these barriers I had created within myself and become a more complete person, that I needed to be brave and I needed to reach out. But honestly, you guys, I don't think it's so interesting. I'm my relationship, I would say, with my better friends in the past 3 years have suddenly become more authentic and more intimate because of the day I sat down. It was after church. We were all having coffee. And I said, you know what? We don't really have a strong Thanksgiving tradition here by ourselves. And we find we are lonely. Will one of you please invite us over? It was, we're not supposed to say things like that. It's not really in today's society. I don't know. It feels like vulnerability isn't something we're supposed to display. And from that moment, of course, they looked at me and they're like, why didn't you tell us sooner? And I think that marked, even yet another level, you know, am I willing to show people where I need help, where I am weak, where am I vulnerable? And I have learned to do that with my female friends, and it has just been only a good thing.
So that was a great example. Is there a time in any stage of your life when you really feel like women have just shown up for you?
I've always known that my mom and sisters were there for me. Actually, I take that back. My siblings. Even as I've gone through points of my life where some of my siblings have irritated the absolute shit out of me, I haven't always liked them. I'm not saying it was all them, because oftentimes it was me, but at the time it was way easier to blame them. I was just really gifted. So I think by having that having come from that, it took me a long time to realize I could find that from other women, Callie. I think actually, this is interesting. I was in a car, this wasn't that long ago, at your mom and dad's house. Callie was in the car with me. I made some bitchy remark about women. And Callie's, it might even been, you probably don't even remember, Callie. Maybe you do.
Her face was drawing a blank.
It was unkind, but it was to the extent of, well, you know how women are. And, you know, I would always admired the way that you girls had developed really healthy female relationships, I felt, at a younger age, because I certainly did not. And I saw the look on Callie's face, and I just stopped. And I was like, oh my gosh, boy, I'm sorry. That was so uncalled for. I just took my own pain and threw it at you. Sorry.
That's fine.
So that was just something that took me a lot longer to find, and I'm so grateful for it.
It happened later for me too, in a way that was healthy, and being in a new community. I'm totally using Sadie, our sister who lives here, as a crutch, because she's just like so much fun. I'm like, I don't need friends. Let's call Sadie.
Sadie will find for me.
Yeah, right. So it's a similar sibling thing. Like when you have so much abundance there's not as much of a gap elsewhere in your life, potentially.
Yeah.
But I'm also, this is a good reminder to me, because while I don't embody oldest traits often, Callie more does than I do, I'm really bad at asking for help. It's very uncomfortable for me. I do not do it well. And all of my close female friends, like, we have worked through things together, and that is part of the strength of it.
It was easy for me to have fun with other females, but it took until college for a friend to say, no, we're going to go through shit and we're actually going to get through it and it's going to be better, because I was so ready to give up. So I've never had like a problem saying, yeah, I'm going to have female friends and it's going to be great. But I did have a problem going deeply into friendship. And I'm so grateful for the friend that did make me go there, because I don't know that I would have by myself. At least it would have taken
It's a hard thing to do. It's a very vulnerable position, I think.
When do you feel beautiful and why?
Oh, okay. So actually, it's interesting that you say that, because there's two different times I can think of right now within the past 2 weeks. And they're just like, they pop at me. So the first time, I'm on the treadmill running, and I am up to 3.25 miles. And the last time I jogged, I did 3.25 miles. I did an incline of 1.5. These numbers matter to me. I did a 5.5 miles per hour for 2 miles, and then I busted out at 6.0. And I had no pain, and I felt comfortable, and I was breathing regularly. And this was all hard fought for. And I got off there, and I was like, yes, I am awesome. I am healthy. I am strong. This makes me gorgeous. This makes me empowered. This makes me, woman, hear me roar. I mean, it was fabulous. And then the second time, Drew and I went to Sarasota. And one of the things I find, while I love the grunge up here, I don't often have a chance to be physically feminine. And I miss that. And so I said, I want to go shopping. So we go to this little boutique shop. Now, the first store, it's hilarious, you guys. I get in this outfit and it ties somehow and it goes like it's supposed to crisscross my breasts and then tie over here and leave a hole down here. And I'm like, what the hell? I don't even know how to do this. So I barely cover my girls, right? Megan being Megan. And I walk out and I said, can someone help me, please? And I love it. This little 20-some-year-old girl helps me figure out how to stuff my girls in and how to get it tied. And it was fabulous, right?
Wait, so to be clear, this is a dress? I'm unclear.
Yes.
What garment? Okay.
It's a dress.
So it's fine that you're not wearing pants. I just want to clarify.
Yes. So I realized that as much fun as it is, I would like something actually that I could possibly wear up north. So we go shopping, and I'm not a shopper, and we finally find a couple dresses.
Wait, okay. First of all, I want to be on that boat in Sarasota in the boob dress. That sounds great. Can someone watch my kid without giving me crippling anxiety, please and thank you. Second,
Sadie comes in
that's
again.
true. I feel great when I live with Sadie. So having had that experience, are you going to try and manufacture more of those moments in where you live? Or is it like a vacation, Megan? Like, what does it do for you?
That's a great question, because I almost feel like it is vacation, Megan, and I'm wondering why. Now, part of it is, frankly, there aren't a lot of opportunities for me to wear that type of dress up north because it's fancy and it's cold. But I actually thought about that, Emily, and I'm not sure. And I want to think deeper as to why, frankly. Yeah.
You're not sure about recreating or
why I would consider that to be vacation, Megan.
Oh, I have vacation, Emily.
Yeah, but I'm of an age now, though. Do I need vacation, Megan? I don't know.
Oh, for me,
That's
it's
a question I'm asking.
My to-do list is very geographically oriented. Like the thing that's always running in the back of my mind. That's why hotel sex is like so much better, because it doesn't exist in a room that's been cleaned for me. And there's not like, do I need to meal prep? Do I, like, when I'm physically out of a place, my list is gone, and I haven't figured out how to banish the list.
No,
so that's why
Drew
vacation, Emily, exists.
No, actually, Drew and I both have that similar tendency to need to be geographically distant in order to really relax. I think that's pretty common. Yeah. No, I have definitely feel just as beautiful when I am hot and sweaty and have accomplished something as I do when I put on my cute little dress that displays my assets.
Kevin and I are actually doing a workout thing together right now, and that has been, I feel great when we do that, because I'm like in my little yoga tights and we're both getting sweaty and we're lifting weights together.
Nice.
And it is real. Yeah, it's been amazing. I don't know if he feels beautiful, but I do.
We'll ask him.
Okay, what is one trait about yourself that is aging like fine wine?
I would say being peaceable, saying less. I don't know how to scarcity of words, actually, Callie. Scarcity of words. It has turned out to be one of the most relaxing and peaceful things I have done for myself. And
you're very good at words. Like, you are a bit of a wordsmith. It's a huge strength of yours. So a tempering of that gift.
Yes, because I overused it, and there were times when my sharp wit was perhaps, not even perhaps, was definitely not kind. And I think that I don't want to be a mean person. I don't even want to be the witty person. No. Yeah.
What do you want to be? What person do you want to be if you're not the mean one?
Honestly,
or the witty
interesting.
One?
Yeah, no, it is. So I would like to be a very peaceable person, not in a weak way. I think people think sometimes that means, it's so good with who I am and where I'm going that I just become very good at listening. And that as I present myself to the world and share who I am, whether that's through words or not, it leaves people, they may not even know why, but I would like them to leave from my company either not having noticed or feeling better about themselves, more at peace, something. And I would like to spread hope.
Great.
I've been thinking about these things, so
I can tell.
I told myself, light, Megan. Remember, keep this light.
No, we just dug in. We're like, let's go. Oh, man.
That's the thing. We need to dig in. It's important. And as Auntie Katie said, motherhood shatters us all, so you might as well.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, lovelies.
Love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.
You've been listening to The Real Mom Hub. Our music is by Naomi O'Leary. You can find us on social at The Real Mom Hub. We're not the authority or even very educated on the medical issues discussed. Do your own research, talk to an expert, make your own decisions, and call us if you learn anything new.
If you like what you hear, follow us on Instagram, or better yet, subscribe to our newsletter. If you don't, that's fine. We can all move on. Our purpose here is community, so if we've resonated with you, tell a friend.
Thanks for listening.